Hello, I'm Donald Leggett and welcome to Share Views, brought to you by the financial website London South East. Today I'm joined by Arthur Millholland, CEO of COPL, or Canadian Overseas Petroleum Ltd, as you may well know them, a sub-Saharan oil and gas exploration and development company with interests in Nigeria and Mozambique. COPL is listed in Canada on TSX and in the UK on the London Stock Exchange. Welcome, Arthur.
Good morning, Donald. Thank you for having me.
It's a delight and a pleasure.
Yeah.
Now you've been at this for 5 years, you tell me.
Well, certainly our adventure in Nigeria started on this project 5 years ago, and to identify it, to acquire it, and now to move it forward.
But now you've signed a loan facility for fairly substantial sums of money. So sum up what that's all about.
First thing is, we know there's oil on this block, and potentially an awful lot of it. What we have to do is, once we get a well that is capable of producing, and we have an early production scheme we're after, is to monetize it and effectively get the oil to market. What this credit facility, and it's a loan facility with Trafigura and Mauritius Commercial Bank, pays for is all the plumbing to go downstream effectively of a producing well to be able to put the oil in a tanker and to export it. The oil will never go to shore, it will be exported.
So what have you designed? Is it a large loan facility? How much is it for?
Right now our current design criteria is to have a facility that we can produce and export just a little north of 25,000 barrels a day, and offload it from a storage tanker into a Suezmax tanker, and under the loan facility or the offtake facility with Trafigura is to take cargoes between 650,000 and 900,000 barrels of oil at a time.
And how much is the loan facility?
How much is the loading facility?
Loan.
Oh, the loan facility.
How much money have you just borrowed?
The loan facility is at a minimum is $30 million and a maximum is $50 million US dollars.
And what else? What is that contingent on? What else do you need to do to get that $30 million loan facility?
The loan facility is contingent on primarily on three things or four things. First is entering into a final formal agreement, which has been started, and that's where the lawyers come in. The second part is that we have to have a well that's capable of production, and so it's to flow 6,000 barrels a day for average over 20 days, which we feel is very easy to do, and we believe we can do that with the first well we drill. The second part of it is that we've been in discussions with service providers to fund up to $100 million of services that are deferred payments in lieu of cash up front to be paid out of the cost oil recovery, and as well would have a small financial interest in the project going forward. The last, the last part of it is that we also have to show that between ourselves, the Canadian Overseas and Shoreline, which we're 50-50 in a joint venture, that we have a combined contributed equity, or if you're not equity, of capital in the project between us, show contributed capital in the project on a 40% of the debt. In other words, it's a 60-40 debt to equity ratio, if you want to call it that. So if we draw 30 million, means that we need to show contributed capital of 20. What it doesn't mean is that we've got to go out and raise $20 million in the equity market. It just means that there's contributed capital that comes from our joint company called Shoreline Canadian Overseas Petroleum Development Corporation, of contributed capital into the program of a minimum 20 million, a maximum 33.
And what's the timeline on getting all these different loan facilities and these different debt facilities and so on? The financing.
We don't have
what's the timeline on the financing?
Yeah, we don't have worries about the contributed capital part of it. Our next step is to conclude an arrangement with a service provider, and we've been in discussions with several over the last year or longer.
Good.
And to conclude that. And our target is to get that concluded hopefully by the end of this month, but Things do take time, but we've...
Have you selected a preferred provider?
Yeah, we have a preferred group that we're talking with here right now. And in our discussions with NNPC, who is the regulator, they would like to see this operation start as soon as we can, for obvious reasons. They want to see some royalty income and taxes. So do we. But we've gone a long way down the road on this conceptually.
What happens after you put the service provider in place? What's the timeline after that? What are the various things which happen?
So the timeline is that we start the whole process off, of working offshore.
We could be quite close to starting this project.
Yeah, and
are you excited about that, Arthur?
Absolutely. Yeah.
This is 5 years coming to fruition.
This has been a lot of work that we've gone in behind. We've engineered it. The engineering work is done. The detailed engineering is still going on, but the first step in the engineering work is done, and we've costed it. And that's the next thing. We have bid documents ready to go out for other services that we need to put in beside all this. So
what would be the worst case scenario in terms of timeline? You said it's maybe in a month you can get the service provider in place.
Yeah.
How much might it stretch by?
The rest of the stretch is going to be contingent on a jackup drilling rig, when's it available, and how long does it take to get there and get it up and running on location. Okay. Along with it, again, will become a mobile production unit, or an FPSO, is to get all this equipment mobilized and on location.
Very good.
We also have, the last but not least, is that the National Oil Company is the concessionaire, and we have a sole risk contract. In other words, they don't have an equity interest in the contract, they don't have a right of back in, but they have to approve all of the contractors that we do, and the bid prices especially. So
people say that Nigeria is a difficult place to work, but that the rewards are considerable. Could you put Nigeria in context for us? The good news and the bad news.
Yeah. Some people say God put the best crude oil resources in the world in somewhat very difficult places, and Nigeria has been blessed as one of the great petroleum provinces in the world, and I mean great. It's not difficult to find oil in Nigeria. What's the issues in Nigeria are being able to operate there around what we would call the political risk and essentially the policies of the government. Some people look at the policies of the government as being anti-foreigner, but I'm a Canadian, and I started off in the oil business in 1982, when I can remember that the business in Canada was run from Houston, Texas, and Canadians didn't like that. And certainly in Nigeria, governments for years have had a policy of indigenization, of trying to be able to create a service sector that's got a Nigerian service sector, to kindle Nigerian independent oil companies to come up.
And presumably you don't have a problem with that.
No, I think it's great.
Yeah.
And in fact,
you just want to play your part.
Exactly. And we have a Nigerian partner called the Shoreline Group, which are involved in many different businesses in Nigeria.
So you're working 50-50?
50-50.
And Shoreline are good guys?
Good guys, yeah. And if any of your listeners Google Kolek Karim, and that's with a K, KK, he's one of the new face of Africa. In other words, Africans, they realized that in the past, post-colonial time, if you want to call it that things were done differently, or difficultly, and there's a different way of doing things. And in other words, if we want to attract Western capital into Nigeria, then you have to operate essentially, or any other African country, by the rules of the West.
So you've got your plan in place. Tell me about OPL 226 and how much oil is potentially there to be garnered.
Yeah. OPL 226 is a very large block, and what it is called an oil prospecting license. To produce oil in Nigeria, you have to convert it to an OML, which is an oil mining license. And historically, you would go out and drill a number of wells and test them, and then go to the government with a plan about how to develop it. And then the process would start. An OPL 226 has got 5 wells have been drilled on OPL 226 historically. Every one of them has found either oil and gas, and one of them just gas. So we know there's an awful lot of hydrocarbon on the block.
So it's less exploration, it's more development.
Correct. And we surround a field that was an OML 83, which is part of this big structure that we're on that's currently being developed, and Schlumberger is financing it with $700 million of service finance, okay? And we surround this block, and it's common. So what we've proposed, and because we have a Nigerian shareholder and participant, the rules in Nigeria are that you can bypass what happened if you were a foreigner and go right to what we call to an early production scheme and to accelerate it into a mining license. And that's the critical component. So the wells that we drill, we plan on putting on production through this scheme that's for Nigerians, allowed for Nigerian participation, which we have.
And do you have your mining license in place, or is that?
The mining license will follow immediately, but we're allowed to produce, and we pay a lower tax rate than if we were as a foreign company. Okay. So it's all very positive. So our plan is to go drill to start 3 to 4 wells from what we'll call one node. The first well will be a horizontal well that goes right by a well that has 16 million barrels of 2C on a P50 case from our evaluator, contingent resources. And what's it contingent on? Is a field development plan being approved and shown to be economic. We can prove the economics, and we're working on the field development.
How much oil do you expect to get per day from that first drill?
6,000 to 10,000 barrels a day.
6,000 to 10,000 is not a bad number.
And we'll follow that up with 2 appraisal wells in a different direction from that well, and they're going to be high angle rather than horizontal. And we would expect a further 5,000 to 6,000 barrels a day per well.
Do you take the revenues from those 5 to 10? Do you take those revenues and fund the rest of the project from that?
Yeah, and that's the idea. And that's the whole concept that the government has to allow firms with Nigerian shareholders, which we have. We own collectively with Shoreline 80% of East Nigeria. 40% of that is a Nigerian shareholding. And that allows them to get the cash flow to finance a larger development, because the government realizes that Total has got deep pockets, Shell's got deep pockets, ExxonMobil's got deep pockets, but there's a way to get, small companies don't, but the way they can do it in stages is to do it this way.
So do you think the government are being quite proactive with you guys?
Yes. Yeah.
Are you surprised?
Not really. What's happened here is that in the last year, the president of the country, who got elected in a landslide, who faces re-election this year on an anti-corruption policy, changed the management of NNPC, which is the national oil company, just like any shareholder would. Why? Because there was no investment going on in the country. The tax and production was dropping, and so how to stir things up? What they want to see is investment. And increase in oil production means an increase in taxes and royalties to the state, right? Because that's the economic rent.
That sounds good.
So when we come up and say we want to get something done, the holdups in the bureaucracy have stopped or have slowed down significantly. So the window is open for us to say, here's where we are, here's our program. They've in fact come back to us, and we presented the initial program to them, which is actually on our website, and said, we'd like some changes to this. We want to see it accelerated, and we want to see, and can you do that? And we said, yes, we can.
You're not just about Nigeria. You've got a gas exploration license in Mozambique.
Correct. Gas and oil, actually.
Gas and oil. So tell me about the gas and oil in Mozambique.
3 years ago, we bid on the 5th licensing round in Mozambique. The license that we were awarded surrounds a field called Pandemi, which is primarily a gas field. It's quite large. Around 2.5 trillion cubic feet of reserves. And for the last 5 years, it and another field to the south of it called Tandy have been on production to a pipeline into South Africa, and they're operated by SAS Oil. 2 years ago, SAS Oil found an oil field to the south of us, and light crude oil. Now, we bid on this license, it's on the coastal plain of Mozambique. It's farmland. There's a highway, the main highway 1 goes right through it, as well as a cross highway that goes inland. It's a straightforward piece of business, but more importantly is we think this gas field is an awful lot bigger than it is. It's found in the 50s by Gulf Oil.
Do you have funds to actually develop in that field right now, though?
What we're waiting on is that they wanted a new form of contract to govern the activities. There were contracts in the 5th round awarded to ExxonMobil, Eni, Sasol, and ourselves. They just finished the former contract has been negotiated with ExxonMobil as the lead negotiator. That's been done. They're waiting to sign that, and what we've been told, we'll deal with Eni next, we'll deal with Sasol third, and you're fourth. Now, originally that was to be in August this month, and like everything else in Africa, you know, governments give you a date and things get pushed back. But we have a local partner in Mozambique, and we're the operator, by the way.
But you're very excited about this.
Extremely, and it's low cost, and it's a great opportunity.
So, final question. Let's sum up the investment case for COPL.
Well, my summary is this. Today our market cap is around £9 million. And we have an extraordinary asset. Certain parts of the share price maybe reflects people's view that it's taking too long to get things done. You know, we're focused on this thing, and it's just not Canadian Overseas Petroleum, it's our partner Shoreline. They're focused on it as well. But it's moving along, and when you look at what we have and you look at our disclosure and do your sums, you'll find that this thing is extremely undervalued. If you're a value investor, there you are. I've had comments from shareholders and saying, well, we're getting tired of how long things change, how long things take. I'm going to sell, I'm going to leave.
Burn rate's too high, delivery's too slow.
My answer to that is,
this is going to be diluted.
If I thought this thing was ridiculous, I would have left an awful long time ago, and I'm a big shareholder as well.
Your interests are aligned with their interests.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And you know, the issues that we've done, the equity issues that we've done to finance our burn rate, I've participated in every one of them.
You're sharing the pain.
And so do my employees.
Okay.
Yeah. So
what's the time frame? What can we look forward to in the next few months?
Well, we're going to have news flow here coming, and I think that's important. So the next step is to announce an agreement with a service provider when we get to. For now, they've asked to remain nameless, which understandably for commercial reasons, but they are well recognized. The second thing is to get the sign off from NNPC on our development scenario. They've asked us here for a workshop to sit down with our technical people and with them to go through the technical aspects and the engineering aspects, the engineering and the geoscience of it. And we've said absolutely, we've got all of our documents together for that. We've got a health and safety and environmental policy that we've to present to them to say we know how to operate offshore. My group, I used to run a company called Oil&Gas that most of these people know. I've got key people from the company. We operated in the North Sea offshore, drilled 120 wells offshore. We know how to work offshore. We may be from Canada, but I got people over here in the UK. I've got an office in Calgary. But the key thing to understand is we know how to get things done. Once we get that point in time, we're there. And I promise everybody that last time I dealt with the Royal Bank of Scotland and they ran out of money, the people we're dealing with loans aren't going to run out of money.
Arthur Millholland, it's been a real pleasure listening to your story today. Thank you so much, and I wish you the very best. Okay, that's it for now.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a real pleasure. Thanks to Arthur for joining us today, and if you found this interview useful, please subscribe for more by Googling London South East YouTube. Thank you.